How one decision changed the outcome of World War II. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. World War II was shaped by countless battles, alliances, and strategies, but few moments were as decisive as Adolf Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union in June 1941. Known as Operation Barbarossa, this single choice transformed a war Germany seemed poised to win into a long, exhausting conflict it ultimately could not survive. The invasion reshaped military priorities, drained German resources, united powerful enemies, and set the stage for Nazi Germany's defeat. Background: Germany at the height of power. By mid-1941, Nazi Germany appeared nearly unstoppable. Much of Europe had fallen under German control. Poland had been conquered in weeks. France had collapsed in just 6 weeks. Norway, Denmark, Belgium, and the Netherlands were occupied. Britain stood alone in Western Europe, battered but unbroken. Crucially, Germany and the Soviet Union were not enemies at this point. In 1939, they had signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression agreement that allowed Hitler to avoid a two-front war while he focused on Western Europe. Despite this pact, Hitler never intended peaceful coexistence with the USSR. His ideology viewed communism as an existential enemy and Slavic lands as territory for German expansion, or Lebensraum, living space. The decision, launching Operation Barbarossa. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched the largest invasion in human history. Over 3 million Axis soldiers, thousands of tanks, and nearly 4,000 aircraft poured into Soviet territory along a vast front stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. Hitler believed the Soviet Union was militarily weak. The Red Army would collapse within weeks. Moscow could be captured. Before winter, Britain would surrender once Germany dominated Europe. This decision was driven by overconfidence, ideological obsession, and a deep underestimation of Soviet resilience. Early successes and fatal miscalculations initially, Operation Barbarossa appeared to validate Hitler's confidence. German forces advanced rapidly, encircling and capturing hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops. Entire Soviet divisions were destroyed. However, beneath these victories lay catastrophic miscalculations. 1. Underestimating Soviet capacity. Germany failed to grasp the sheer scale of the Soviet Union. The USSR could absorb massive losses, relocate factories east of the Ural Mountains, mobilize millions of new soldiers. What Germany saw as crushing defeats were, for the Soviets, setbacks they could survive. 2. Logistical failure. German supply lines stretched hundreds of miles across poor roads and hostile terrain. Fuel, food, ammunition, and winter clothing ran dangerously low. 3. The Russian winter. Hitler assumed the campaign would end before winter. It didn't. By late 1941, German troops, unprepared for sub-zero temperatures, faced frostbite, equipment failure, and collapsing morale, turning the war into a two-front nightmare. By invading the Soviet Union, Hitler committed the very mistake German strategists had feared for decades: a two-front war. In the West, Britain continued to resist. In the East, the Soviet Union fought with increasing determination. The Eastern Front became a war of annihilation. It consumed the majority of German troops, most German tanks and aircraft, enormous economic resources. From this point forward, Germany was fighting a war it could not sustain. Stalingrad and the beginning of the end. The consequences of Barbarossa culminated in battles like Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943. There, an entire German army was encircled and destroyed, an unprecedented defeat. After Stalingrad, German offensives in the east largely ended. The Red Army began pushing westward. Germany permanently lost the initiative. The Eastern Front would eventually carry Soviet forces all the way to Berlin. Global consequences of the decision. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union also had wider implications. It indirectly helped bring the United States deeper into the war by strengthening the Allied coalition. It turned the USSR into one of the most powerful Allied forces. It ensured that Germany faced overwhelming manpower and industrial output. By 1945, nearly 80% of German military casualties had occurred on the Eastern Front, a direct result of Operation Barbarossa. Conclusion: one decision, irreversible consequences. Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union stands as one of the most consequential military choices in history. What was intended to secure German dominance instead guaranteed Germany's destruction. Operation Barbarossa ended any realistic chance of German victory, turned allies into mortal enemies, shifted the balance of power permanently against Nazi Germany. In the vast sweep of World War II, many events mattered, but this single decision changed everything. It transformed a war Germany might have negotiated or contained into a total conflict it was destined to lose. While Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union doomed Nazi Germany in the long run, the Allies' decision to launch the D-Day invasion in June 1944 ensured that Germany's defeat would be swift, decisive, and unavoidable. Operation Overlord was the boldest military gamble of the war, and its success permanently shifted the balance of power in Europe. The problem facing the Allies. By 1943, the Allies were winning, but not fast enough. The Soviet Union was bearing the brunt of the fighting on the Eastern Front. Millions had already died in battles like Stalingrad and Kursk. Stalin demanded a second front in Western Europe to relieve pressure. However, invading Nazi-occupied Europe was incredibly risky. Germany had spent years fortifying the Atlantic coast with bunkers, mines, artillery, and obstacles, what Hitler called the Atlantic Wall. The question was not whether to invade, but when, where, and how. The decision: invade Normandy. The Allies ultimately chose to land in Normandy, France, on June 6, 1944. This decision went against some expectations. Normandy was farther from Britain than Pas-de-Calais. The weather was unpredictable, the beaches were heavily defended. Yet Normandy offered one crucial advantage: surprise. The Allies used an elaborate deception plan, Operation Fortitude, to convince Germany that the real invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais. Fake armies, dummy tanks, false radio traffic, and double agents misled German intelligence completely. Hitler and his generals were fooled. Why the decision was so risky? D-Day could easily have failed, and if it had, the war might have dragged on for years. The risks included massive casualties on exposed beaches, German counterattacks pushing Allied forces back into the sea, loss of morale and political support in Allied countries. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, was so aware of the danger that he prepared a speech accepting full responsibility if the invasion failed. That single choice, to proceed despite the risks, defined the future of Europe. June 6, 1944. The longest day, on D-Day, over 156,000 Allied troops landed by sea and air. 5 beaches were assaulted: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines to disrupt German defenses. Casualties were severe, especially at Omaha Beach, but the landing succeeded. By the end of the day, the Allies had established a foothold in Nazi-occupied France. There was no turning back. The consequences of the decision. Once the Allies broke through Normandy, France was gradually liberated. Germany was forced into a true two-front war. Allied armies advanced from the west while the Soviets pushed from the east. Germany's defeat became a matter of time, not possibility. Within 11 months, Hitler was dead less than a year. Berlin fell May 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally. None of this would have happened without the decision to launch D-Day. Why this decision changed the war forever? The D-Day invasion mattered because it accelerated the end of the war in Europe, prevented the Soviet Union from liberating all of Western Europe, shaped the political map of the post-war world, led to the creation of modern democratic Europe. In many ways, D-Day didn't just win the war, it shaped the peace. Connecting the two decisions together, these two decisions defined World War II. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union guaranteed Germany's long-term defeat. The Allies' invasion of Normandy ensured that defeat came quickly and decisively. One decision was driven by arrogance and ideology, the other by coordination, patience, and calculated risk. History turned on both. If Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union and the Allied landing at Normandy determined the fate of Europe, Japan's decision to attack Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, changed the course of the war on a truly global scale. This single action transformed the United States from a distant supporter into a fully committed combatant and ultimately sealed the defeat of the Axis powers. Background: rising tensions in the Pacific. By the late 1930s, Japan had emerged as a powerful imperial nation. Seeking resources and regional dominance, it expanded aggressively across Asia. Manchuria was invaded in 1931. China was plunged into full-scale war. In 1937, Southeast Asia became Japan's next target. However, Japan lacked critical resources, especially oil and steel. The United States, alarmed by Japanese aggression, responded with economic pressure, including severe trade embargoes. By 1941, Japan faced a stark choice: retreat from its conquests or strike to eliminate opposition and secure resources. By force, Japan chose war. The decision: strike the United States. First, Japanese leaders believed that the United States was their greatest obstacle in the Pacific. The U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet, stationed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, posed a direct threat to Japanese expansion. The plan was bold and risky: deliver a surprise attack, destroy American battleship. Japanese planners hoped that a decisive blow would shock the United States into negotiation rather than total war. It was a massive miscalculation. December 7, 1941, a day that changed history. On the morning of December 7th, Japanese aircraft launched a devastating surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The results were shocking. Over 2,400 Americans killed, 8 battleships damaged or sunk, hundreds of aircraft destroyed. Yet despite the destruction, the attack failed in critical ways. U.S. aircraft carriers were not in port fuel depots, and repair facilities were left intact. American industrial capacity remained untouched. Instead of weakening American resolve, the attack unified the nation overnight. America enters the war. The very next day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress, calling December 7th, a date which will live in infamy. The United States declared war on Japan. Within days, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. America entered both the Pacific and European theaters. This decision instantly transformed World War II into a conflict Japan and Germany could no longer hope to win. Why this decision was so catastrophic for Japan? Japan underestimated 3 crucial factors. 1. American industrial power. The U.S. rapidly outproduced all Axis powers combined, building ships, aircraft, and weapons at an unmatched pace. 2. American resolve. Rather than demoralizing the U.S., Pearl Harbor united Americans politically, militarily, and emotionally. 3. A long war. Japan had planned for a short conflict. Instead, it faced a prolonged war of attrition against a vastly superior economy. By 1943, Japan was on the defensive. By 1945, its cities were burning, its navy destroyed, and its options exhausted. Global impact of the decision. Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor had consequences far beyond the Pacific. It guaranteed Allied victory by adding U.S. strength to the war. It accelerated Germany's defeat by opening additional fronts. It reshaped global politics, placing the U.S. at the center of world affairs. Without Pearl Harbor, American involvement might have remained limited. With it, the Axis powers faced overwhelming force. Conclusion: a decision that backfired completely. Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor stands as one of the most dramatic examples of a decision producing the opposite of its intended effect. What Japan hoped would secure dominance in Asia, neutralize American power. Instead, the United States brought unmatched industrial and military strength into the war, ensured the eventual destruction of the Japanese Empire. In the story of World War II, Pearl Harbor was not just an attack. It was a turning point that changed the destiny of nations. Among all the decisions made during World War II, the United States' decision to use atomic weapons against Japan in August 1945 remains the most controversial and one of the most consequential. In just 2 bombings, the nature of warfare changed forever, and the deadliest conflict in human history came to an abrupt end. The situation in 1945, a war nearing its limit. By mid-1945, Germany had already surrendered, but the war in the Pacific raged on. Japan, though clearly defeated militarily, refused to surrender. Key realities facing the Allies. Japan's Navy and Air Force were largely destroyed. Japanese cities were devastated by conventional bombing, yet the Japanese government showed no sign of unconditional surrender. The Battle of Okinawa, April to June 1945, revealed what an invasion of Japan might look like. Over 200,000 deaths, fierce resistance from both soldiers and civilians. American planners estimated that a full invasion of Japan could cost hundreds of thousands of Allied lives, possibly more. The U.S. faced a grim choice. The decision: use a new weapon. Since 1942, the United States had secretly developed a revolutionary weapon under the Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb. By summer 1945, the weapon was ready. President Harry S. Truman had to decide: invade Japan and accept massive casualties, continue conventional bombing and blockade, or use the atomic bomb to force immediate surrender. Truman approved the use of the bomb, believing it would end the war quickly, save Allied lives, prevent prolonged suffering. It was a decision without historical precedent. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. Approximately 70,000 people died instantly. Tens of thousands more died later from radiation. Japan did not surrender immediately. On August 9, 1945, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Around 40,000 people were killed instantly. Entire communities were destroyed. The unprecedented devastation shocked Japan and the world. Japan's surrender. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito addressed the Japanese people, announcing surrender. This was the first time many citizens had ever heard his voice. Japan formally surrendered on September 2, 1945, ending World War II. The decision to use atomic weapons had achieved its immediate goal. The war ended without a land invasion. Allied casualties were avoided. 6 years of global conflict came to a close. Why this decision changed history forever. The atomic bomb did more than end World War II. It reshaped the future. 1. A new era of warfare. Humanity entered the nuclear age, where a single weapon could destroy an entire city. 2. The Cold War. The bomb altered global power dynamics, contributing to tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. 3. Moral and ethical debate. To this day, historians debate: was the decision justified? Could Japan have surrendered without the bomb? Did it save lives or unnecessarily take them? No matter the answer, the decision remains one of the most debated in history. A decision unlike any other, unlike earlier wartime choices. This decision ended the war, instantly introduced weapons of mass destruction, forced humanity to confront its own capacity for annihilation. It proved that a single decision could not only end a war, but change the world itself. World War II was not decided by a single battle or a single nation alone. Instead, it was shaped by a series of critical human decisions, each one altering the direction of the war in irreversible ways. From Europe to the Pacific, these choices determined not only who would win, but how the modern world would be formed. Connecting the turning point decisions. Each major decision discussed in this series acted like a domino, triggering consequences far beyond what leaders initially imagined. 1. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union. This decision destroyed Germany's strategic advantage. By opening a massive Eastern Front, Hitler ensured a long war of attrition that Germany lacked the manpower and resources to win. It marked the beginning of Nazi Germany's downfall. 2. The Allied decision to launch D-Day. The Normandy invasion transformed inevitable defeat into rapid collapse for Germany. It liberated Western Europe, forced Germany into a two-front war, and reshaped post-war Europe's political future. 3. Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, intended to protect Japan's empire. This decision instead brought the United States fully into the war. America's industrial strength and military power overwhelmed the Axis, making their defeat unavoidable. 4. The decision to use the atomic bomb. This choice ended the war abruptly, preventing a costly invasion of Japan. but at a terrible human cost. It introduced nuclear warfare and forever changed international relations and military strategy. The common thread, human judgment. What unites all these moments is not technology or chance, but human judgment. Overconfidence led to disaster. Fear forced bold action. Desperation created unprecedented weapons. Courage and cooperation brought victory. World War II shows that decisions made by a few individuals can affect millions of lives and echo for generations. Lessons from these decisions. The war offers lasting lessons. Military power alone does not guarantee success. Ideology can blind leaders to reality. Unity and cooperation can overcome even the greatest threats. Ethical choices in war carry consequences long after the fighting ends. These lessons remain deeply relevant in a world still shaped by the outcomes of World War II. Final reflection. World War II ended in 1945, but the decisions made during it continue to define global politics, security, and morality. Borders were redrawn, superpowers emerged, and humanity entered an age where survival itself depended on wise decision-making. In the end, World War II was not just a clash of armies. It was a clash of choices, and history was written by those choices. Beyond battles and dates, World War II is best understood by examining how decisions were made and whether they could have been different. Historians continue to debate these turning points, not just to understand the past, but to draw lessons for the future. Could these decisions have been avoided? Hitler and the Soviet Union. Many historians argue that Germany could have survived longer or even forced a negotiated peace had Hitler not invaded the USSR. The decision was ideological rather than strategic, driven by hatred of communism rather than military logic. This makes it one of the clearest examples of personal belief overriding professional advice. D-Day and Allied hesitation. The Allies delayed the invasion of Western Europe for years. Some critics argue it should have happened earlier, possibly reducing Soviet dominance in Eastern Europe. Others believe the delay was necessary to ensure success. Either way, timing proved as important as action. Pearl Harbor as a gamble. Japan's leaders knew they could not defeat the United States in a long war. Pearl Harbor was a gamble based on hope rather than reality. In hindsight, it represents how short-term tactical thinking can lead to long-term catastrophe. The atomic bomb debate. This decision remains the most controversial.